I spent $14,000 on my daughter's wedding, thinking it was the embodiment of my dreams for her happiness. But at the reception, she said, "I want to thank my real father," and pointed to her groom's father. Everyone froze in surprise. I fell silent, my heart breaking from betrayal. Then I did something he will never forget. Her wedding turned into a nightmare where justice took revenge for years of hidden sacrifices. Tires shrieked against pavement somewhere outside, but my attention stayed fixed on the torque wrench turning in my grip. The Chevy's engine bay held my eyes. People with cars always wanted to be somewhere else 5 minutes ago. My hand slipped on the final bolt securing the alternator, and a quiet oath left my lips. Dad, Dad. The words came out ragged, shaking with panic. Welcome back to Dad's Revenge. I'm glad you're here with me today. If these stories ever hit close to home, a like and a subscription mean more than you know, so if this one speaks to you, I hope you'll consider it. Before we get into things, I'd love it if you dropped one word in the comments that captures how you're feeling right now. Just one word. And a quick note, some elements of this story have been shaped for the purposes of storytelling, and any resemblance to specific real people or events is purely coincidental. It's the message underneath that truly matters. My head jerked up so fast I cracked it on the hood. The torque wrench hit the concrete with a clang that rang through Beckett's auto service like a rifle shot. Lacey stood framed in the doorway, backlit by the afternoon sun pouring through the garage entrance. Her silver Audi, the one she had no idea I'd quietly helped finance, sat askew in the parking lot, driver's door still hanging wide open. Mascara had carved dark trails down her cheeks, and her voice was raw from crying. "Lacey, what's wrong, sweetheart?" She stumbled in designer heels ticking against the oil-stained floor. The fabric of her expensive dress, the kind Clifford Calloway had been nudging her toward lately, was crushed, like she'd been wringing it in her fists. "She's gone. Donna Pruitt, the wedding planner, she's vanished." The words came out in broken gasps. $8,000, Dad. Gone. Just gone. I pulled the rag from my pocket and cleaned the grease from my hands, each movement slow and deliberate. $8,000. That number was burned into me because Lacey had been so proud scraping together the advance out of her own savings. What she didn't know was that I'd already quietly covered the remaining $12,000 in coordinator fees, floral upgrades, and reception add-ons. The venue called this morning. Lacey went on pacing like something caged. They're threatening to pull the reception if we don't have a new coordinator by Thursday. The caterer won't move without confirmation. The florist says the arrangements will wilt in storage if nobody coordinates the pickup. I set my tools down one by one, each finding its spot on the workbench. My hands shook slightly. Not age, but the old familiar sting of watching my daughter's faith in me erode again. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Her voice climbed higher, sharper. Your bargain choices always blow up in everyone's face. The words landed like something physical. I straightened my gloves and let my eyes drift to the stack of invoices tucked in my desk drawer. $2,400 for dress alterations she'd never once requested. $11,800 for upgraded centerpieces after I'd overheard her admiring them. $950 for the table linens she'd mentioned wanting but couldn't stretch to cover. All paid without a word, all unacknowledged. Lacey's pacing grew more frantic. Clifford would never let this happen. He's already put $50,000 into this wedding, and everything he touches turns out perfectly. While you, she trailed off, but the comparison hung there in the air like exhaust fumes. I turned away, pretending to sort wrenches that were already in perfect order. The garage shrank around me, pressing in, feeling every bit like the failure she saw whenever she looked my way. Outside traffic moved steadily along Fairview Avenue, carrying people toward lives that probably made more sense than mine. The photographer might back out. Lacey went on her panic-gathering speed. The dress fitting is tomorrow, but there's no coordinator to confirm it. I'd have to reach 150 guests if we push the date, and Nolan's family. She stopped mid-sentence, her face collapsing. His father warned him about this, about trusting, about cutting corners. The meaning was plain enough. Clifford Calloway, with his restaurant empire and his breezy talk of $50,000 wedding budgets, had been waiting for exactly this, waiting to be proven right about the struggling mechanic who couldn't give his daughter what she deserved. I fished my phone out and scrolled through my contacts until I landed on a business card I'd photographed weeks back. Linfield Elite Events, the most exclusive wedding planning service in Boise. Their coordinator fee alone eclipsed what most people cleared in a month, but they could rescue a wedding on 48 hours' notice. I should have listened to Nolan. Lacey murmured more to herself than to me. We could have let his family handle everything right from the start. I found the number and lifted my thumb to dial. Lacey turned and drove toward the door, her heels hammering an angry beat against the concrete. Just see what you can do. Dad, but don't make any promises we can't keep. The garage door slammed shut behind her, leaving me alone with the smell of motor oil and the sound of her silver Audi roaring away. I stared at the number on my screen, the one that could fix all of it, and hit call. 1 ring, 2. While I waited for Linfield Elite Events to pick up, the familiar sounds of the shop faded out around me. The torque wrench went quiet, traffic noise fell away, and just like that, I was back in my living room 8 months ago, watching Lacey burst through my front door, carrying a happiness so pure it ached to think about. Dad, Dad. You'll never guess. September 15th, 2023, 7:30 in the evening. I'd been reading the business section, my glasses creeping down my nose, when Lacey practically bounced through the doorway. She still had her key back then, and used it without a second thought. Her voice carried real warmth, nothing like the sharp edge it held now. I set the paper down and took a good look at my daughter. Really looked hair in a loose ponytail, still wearing trail runners and a zip-up hoodie, cheeks flushed from excitement and the September mountain air. Sweetheart, you look like you've been sprinting up Bogus Basin Mountain. Close. She laughed that bright musical sound I hadn't heard in months. Nolan proposed. Dad, he proposed at sunset, right there on the summit. I was on my feet before I'd thought about it, my reading glasses skidding off onto the coffee table. 2 steps, and I had her in my arms, lifting her off the ground in a bear hug that made her squeal with laughter. Lacey, that's wonderful. I'm so happy for you, sweetheart. She pulled back to show me the ring. Simple, elegant, nothing showy. A working man's taste, I thought, and I respected it. Nolan had good instincts back then, before his father's influence settled in. He had this whole speech ready, Lacey gushed, sinking onto the faded fabric sofa, while I looked the ring over with proper fatherly attention about how he wanted to be above the whole world when he asked me to be his world. It was so cheesy, but Dad, it was perfect. The front door opened again 30 minutes later. Nolan stepped inside, nervous energy coming off him in waves. His handshake was firm and respectful, man to man. Mr. Beckett, I hope I have your blessing, sir. I know I should have asked first, but you have it, I said, and I meant every word. This was the Nolan I'd come to know over the past year, thoughtful, hard-working, despite his family's money, genuinely devoted to Lacey. Welcome to the family, son. The tension drained visibly from his face. Thank you, sir. That means everything to me. I offered him a beer, which he took without fuss. We talked through wedding timelines and Lacey's hopes for a spring ceremony. Nolan mentioned his family's excitement about meeting me, said his father was eager to pitch in with arrangements. There was real consideration in his voice, then a genuine regard for my place as Lacey's father. The knock at the door came an hour after that. Nolan had phoned his parents, too full of joy to wait. Clifford Warren Calloway appeared on my modest front porch, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. His car, some European SUV I couldn't place, gleamed beneath the streetlight at the curb. Gerald, he said, extending a manicured hand. I had to come meet the man who raised such a wonderful daughter. His handshake was firm, but quick, his eyes already cataloging my humble living room, the family photos lining the walls, the comfortable but well-worn furniture, the plain decor of a working man's home. Of course, we'll want only the best for these two. Clifford continued lowering himself into my armchair without waiting to be asked. I've already spoken with several venues. The Capitol Ballroom downtown has availability, and I know the owner personally. I watched Lacey from my spot by the window, the way she sat up straighter when Clifford mentioned the Capitol Ballroom, the slight widening of her eyes as he tossed out figures that amounted to months of my visible income. Mr. Calloway, I said carefully. That's very generous, but Lacey and I were planning to please call me Clifford and none of that. This is my son's wedding too. I want to do my part. He smiled, but it never quite reached his eyes. After all, a girl only marries once. No reason to hold back. Lacey glanced around my living room, then, and I caught something I'd never seen cross her face before, a flicker of embarrassment. Not at the room itself, but at seeing it through Clifford's gaze refracted through his easy wealth and his talk of holding nothing back. Dad's been putting money aside for my wedding since I was little, Lacey said. But the usual fierce pride in her voice wasn't quite there. Of course he has, Clifford agreed smoothly. I'm sure he's done everything he could within his means. But why shouldn't Lacey have everything she's ever dreamed of? The seeds went in the ground that night. I watched them take root in Lacey's expression, in the way her eyes tracked Clifford with something close to fascination when he spoke of exclusive caterers and destination bachelor parties. After they left, she lingered a few minutes. She hugged me goodbye, but it felt different somehow. Still warm, but measured. For the first time in her life, she looked around my living room with critical eyes, seeing it not as the home where she'd grown up, loved and safe, but as proof of limitations. The line connected in my ear. Linfield Elite Events. This is Catherine speaking. How can I help you? The call ended. $12,000, double their standard rate for emergency service. But Renee from Linfield Elite Events had agreed to take Lacey's wedding. I sat in my home office staring at the banking app on my phone, watching the transaction drain from my account. $847,000 remaining balance. That number felt unreal after Lacey's words about my bargain choices. I scrolled back through recent transactions, each one a quiet sacrifice made without a word. $2,400 for dress alterations she'd never once requested. $11,800 for upgraded centerpieces, because I'd overheard her admiring them at someone else's wedding. $950 for the linens she'd mentioned wanting but couldn't stretch to cover. $23,000 in total, all paid in silence, all unacknowledged. The desk lamp threw a warm pool of light across the family photos spread over my workspace. 8-year-old Lacey in pigtails standing proudly next to me in the garage, her small hands helping me work on Mrs. Callahan's sedan. High school graduation, where she'd been valedictorian thanks to private school tuition I'd covered, while letting her believe it was a scholarship. College graduation. Her proud smile as she held me close, never knowing I'd quietly wiped out her student loans so she could start her life unburdened. When had loving her become the ladder she used to look down on me? I pulled a leather journal from the desk drawer, the same one where I kept a running record of every hidden contribution I'd made to her life. The villa deed was tucked underneath. An $800,000 property overlooking Lucky Peak Lake purchased 2 years back as her wedding gift. I'd planned to surprise her after the ceremony, watch her face change when she understood that her supposedly poor father had given her something Clifford Calloway's checkbook couldn't match. My phone buzzed with a text. Lacey, Dad. I'm sorry about today. I was scared. Can we talk tomorrow? I held the message on my screen thumb, hanging over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to call her, that minute drive over to her apartment, spread the bank statements and property deeds across her table, prove that her father wasn't the disappointment she'd made him out to be. But another part, the part that remembered how she'd scanned my living room with those freshly critical eyes 8 months ago, whispered something harder. If she couldn't love a struggling father, did she deserve a wealthy one? I opened the journal and wrote Day 1 of the wedding week test. The coordinator would phone Lacey tomorrow morning with the story that a miraculous last-minute slot had opened up. I'd already built the cover an old National Guard buddy who owed me. Ray Linfield was a real person I'd served alongside briefly 20 years ago, now running the wedding planning firm his daughter had built. Renee had laughed when I'd asked her to use that name. Your family drama, she'd said. But for $12,000 cash, I'll say I know the Pope. My computer showed another $3,000 transfer queued up funds to cushion any vendor trouble that might surface. I'd mapped out every scenario, every possible crack that could threaten Lacey's perfect day, all while keeping up the fiction that her father could barely scrape together a contribution. The irony wasn't wasted on me. Clifford Calloway, for all his restaurant empire money, had never given up anything that actually cost him something. His $50,000 was loose change, a power move, not an act of love. Yet Lacey read his effortless spending as evidence of deeper devotion. I touched the villa deed one more time. 2 bedrooms, wraparound deck, private beach access. I'd pictured Lacey and Nolan spending summers there, maybe bringing grandchildren along one day. But first she needed to find her way back to the man who'd actually been carrying her all along. The coffee in my mug had gone stone cold. Outside, Boise lay quiet in the dark, oblivious to the fact that one father was engineering the most expensive lesson in love he'd ever attempted. My phone lit up again, Lacey's text still sat unanswered. Dad, I'm sorry about today. I was scared. Can we talk tomorrow? I typed and erased 3 different replies, then landed on, of course, sweetheart. I'll be there at 10:30. But I didn't press send. Not yet. Tomorrow would tell me whether my daughter could find her way back to loving the man who'd never once stopped loving her, or whether she'd confirm that someone else's money had already purchased her heart. My finger hovered over the button as the clock turned midnight. I sent it at 12:01 a.m., then lay awake the rest of the night running through my performance. By morning, I had every line memorized. Ray Linfield, National Guard, lost years ago. Found him through social media. Called in an old debt. Simple. Believable. False. Lacey's apartment building rose in the trendy downtown district, all glass and sharp angles, exactly the kind of place Clifford Calloway would nod at approvingly. I took the elevator to the 14th floor, carrying coffee and muffins. As peace offerings, my phone weighted down in my pocket by the deception loaded onto it. She answered in her bathrobe, hair tangled from a night without sleep. Behind her, the apartment looked like a wedding planning disaster had gone off inside it. Magazines blanketing every surface. Tissue boxes within reach everywhere. Empty coffee cups leaving rings on the glass table. Her wedding dress hung from the bedroom doorframe. A $3,000 creation I'd helped pay for without her ever knowing. Dad? Her voice came out small, unsure. I was about to speak when she got there first. Yesterday was... You were scared, I said, stepping in and setting the coffee on her counter. I understand. The tension drained out of her face. She was after forgiveness without having to fully reckon with the cruelty, and I was handing it over, the same as I always had. Her phone rang at exactly 10:15 a.m. Renee from Linfield Elite Events. Right on schedule. Lacey Beckett. This is Renee from Linfield Elite Events. I have incredible news. Lacey's eyes went wide as she put it on speaker. I fussed over the muffins, feigning mild interest, while my heart knocked hard against my ribs. We've had a last-minute cancellation for this Saturday. Your wedding date. I know this is out of the ordinary, but when Ray Linfield called me personally, I had to make an exception. Ray Linfield. Lacey's voice jumped higher. I don't understand. Your father's friend from the National Guard. He said you were in a crisis, and honestly, when Ray Linfield asks for a favor, Renee's laugh was perfectly rehearsed. Our fee for this kind of notice is $12,000, but Ray insisted we give you exceptional care. Lacey stared at me, mouth open. The bag of muffins crumpled in my grip. Dad, you know, Ray Linfield, the Ray Linfield of Linfield Elite Events. I lifted a shoulder, putting on the modest discomfort of a man whose connections had just been exposed. We served together years back. Lost touch, but I tracked him down online. Figured it was worth asking. This is impossible. Lacey dropped back onto her couch. Wedding planning wreckage surrounded her like the physical remains of her panic. Linfield Elite Events has a 2-year waiting list. The apartment door opened, and Nolan let himself in, with his key looking worn and underslept. His expensive suit was creased, his usually neat hair out of place. I came as soon as I got your message. Is the wedding really? He stopped when he saw me. Mr. Beckett, any news? Lacey practically jumped off the couch. Nolan, you are not going to believe this. Dad saved everything. He knows Ray Linfield personally from the National Guard. Nolan's eyebrows climbed. In the 8 months I'd known him, I'd never once seen that look on his face, something close to genuinely impressed. Ray Linfield, the event planner. Nolan set down his briefcase, studying me with fresh attention. Sir, how did you pull that off? My father's been trying to get Linfield Elite booked for business events for years. The lie came out smooth, now polished from a night of rehearsal. Sometimes it's not about money, son. It's about brotherhood. Ray and I ground through some hard training together. Lacey grabbed Nolan's hands, her excitement filling the room. Renee's taking our wedding. Same day, same time, everything's saved. I watched Nolan's face shift as it all landed. The quiet condescension that had been creeping into his manner over the past few months, absorbed from his father, dropped away, and something that looked like genuine respect took its place. Mr. Beckett, I don't know how to thank you. His handshake was firmer than it had been in a long time. Dad is going to be stunned. Linfield Elite is the most exclusive firm in the Treasure Valley. There it was. The word that changed the whole equation. Exclusive. Not sacrifice, not love, not a father pouring out his life savings. Exclusivity. Access. Status. I watched Lacey's face as Nolan's words reached her. Her gratitude felt hollow, fixed entirely on the social capital I'd apparently acquired rather than the disaster I'd actually prevented. "I can't believe you know people like Ray Linfield." Lacey laughed, and the sound was bright, but somehow it stung. Maybe Clifford underestimated our family connections. Our family connections. As though my invented friendship with Linfield had elevated her standing rather than representing $23,000 of invisible sacrifice. Nolan was already reaching for his phone. "I should call Dad, let him know the wedding's back on track. He's been worried sick about the catering deposits." But before Nolan could dial, Lacey's phone rang. The screen showed Clifford Calloway's contact photo, a polished headshot that broadcast wealth and self-importance. "Clifford," Lacey answered, putting it on speaker with unmistakable excitement. "You'll never believe what happened. Lacey, darling, Nolan told me about your wedding planning disaster. I was already preparing to make some calls." "No need," Lacey's voice bubbled with triumph. "Dad saved everything. He reached out to Ray Linfield. You know, Linfield Elite Events. They're taking our wedding." Silence stretched across the line. When Clifford finally spoke, his voice carried something I hadn't heard from him before: surprised interest. "Ray Linfield? Interesting." A pause. "I should meet this friend of your father's." The coffee cup in my hand suddenly felt heavier than it had any right to. 2 days of wedding preparations had gone by since Clifford Calloway's pointed remark about meeting my fictional friend, Ray Linfield. I'd managed to sidestep that confrontation so far, but the tension had been building the way pressure builds in a sealed engine. Now standing outside Nolan and Lacey's apartment with a small wrapped gift, I felt the collision coming. Nolan answered the door with a handshake that was noticeably cooler than before. His usually neat hair was out of place. His expensive shirt creased from what looked like a night spent pacing rather than sleeping. Through the doorway, I could see their living room transformed into Wedding Command Central gift boxes, stacked like small towers, seating charts fanning across every surface, and Lacey's dress hanging from the bedroom doorframe like a $3,000 ghost. "Mr. Beckett," Nolan said, his voice carrying a formality that hadn't been there a week ago. "We need to go over some final details." Lacey appeared from the kitchen floor, dusting her apron, her face brightening when she caught sight of me. "Dad, perfect timing. I'm testing the rehearsal dinner cookies." But even she seemed to feel the current running between Nolan and me. "I'll get coffee," she said quickly, slipping away to give us the space she probably assumed we needed for the usual father and son-in-law talk. I handed Nolan the wrapped gift, a check for $5,000, carefully sized to represent my official contribution level. Large enough not to embarrass Lacey, modest enough not to crowd Clifford's territory. Nolan's reaction told me something. Instead of gratitude, his expression edged toward suspicion. "This is very generous, Mr. Beckett, especially after the Linfield events expense must have stretched things for you." "Ray was helping an old friend," I replied carefully, watching how Nolan's shoulders had squared, how a new confidence had moved into his voice that I hadn't heard there before. "Right? Ray Linfield." Nolan set the envelope down without opening it. "Dad's actually curious about him. Says Linfield Elite Events normally requires a 6-month advance booking minimum." The words floated there between us like smoke. I kept my expression steady, but internally every alarm I had was going off. Clifford had been digging. "Your father certainly knows his event planning," I said, keeping my tone even. "He does." Nolan moved to the window and looked down at the street the way a general eyes. "A field before committing. He called Linfield Events yesterday. Had an interesting conversation with their booking coordinator." I felt my jaw tighten without meaning to. "Oh, they wouldn't confirm anything about any Ray Linfield favor. Said they don't discuss client arrangements with outside parties." Nolan turned back to face me, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked exactly like his father. "Dad thinks there may be some misunderstanding about the whole arrangement." The accusation was subtle but unmistakable. A 29-year-old who'd never put in a hard day's work in his life was calling me a liar. "What exactly is Clifford suggesting?" I asked. My voice dropped low and careful. Nolan retreated slightly, perhaps realizing he'd waded in deeper than he'd intended. "Nothing specific. He likes things clear-cut, business arrangements transparent. Wants to confirm everything around the wedding is above board." Above board. As though anything I'd ever done for Lacey wasn't. "I've always provided for Lacey." Honestly, I said, each word measured out precisely. Of course you have." Nolan dragged a hand through his hair, the flash of borrowed arrogance giving way to discomfort now that we were nose to nose with it. It's just that Dad's hoping to handle the reception toast, given his substantial investment in the celebration. There it was, the actual point of this conversation. That's traditionally the bride's father's role, I said. Well, yes, but given the financial contributions, Nolan shrugged in a way that was meant to read as casual, but landed as calculated. Dad's used to being out front at major events. Maybe it would be better if he took the lead on the wedding day logistics. You know, given your limitations. The word landed like something thrown at speed. Limitations. My limitations, the same ones that had quietly bankrolled $23,000 of his perfect wedding. Lacey came back with the coffee, her smile dimming as she read the heat radiating off both of us. Is everything okay? You two look like you're planning a battle instead of a wedding. Just sorting out some details, sweetheart, I said, taking the cup with hands that shook slightly from the effort of keeping my anger contained. Nolan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and for the first time all afternoon offered a real smile. Dad's handling the final vendor confirmations. He wants everything perfect for Lacey. Of course he did. Clifford Calloway charging in with his restaurant empire behind him, making certain everyone understood who the real provider was in this family. Lacey's phone cut through the atmosphere. The screen showed Capitol Ballroom Catering. Oh, that's the venue, Lacey answered brightly. Hi, this is Lacey Beckett. What additional charges? Her expression darkened. I don't understand. We already signed off on the final menu. I caught pieces of the conversation, but one phrase turned my blood cold. Mr. Calloway said you'd handle the additional charges for the premium wine selection and upgraded floral arrangements. Lacey looked confused, glancing between Nolan and me. I didn't approve any upgrades. Nolan was already reaching for his phone, probably to ring his father, but I was sitting with something more troubling than wine list revisions. Clifford had been making decisions about Lacey's wedding, without telling anyone. Sunday morning came in gray and overcast, the kind of Treasure Valley weather built for sitting with hard thoughts. I stood in my bedroom at 11 a.m., methodically getting ready for what would either be the greatest day of my daughter's life or the day I lost her for good. My best suit was laid across the bed 10 years old, but kept up carefully pressed to a sharp crease. Plain black, nothing that announced itself exactly what Clifford Calloway would expect from a mechanic scraping by. I'd gone with a modest silver watch, my father's tie clip, and a small white boutonniere that cost more than most people would guess, but looked appropriately understated. In the mirror, I rehearsed the face I'd wear. Proud father, grateful for his daughter's joy, honored to be folded into the Calloway family's generous celebration. The lie sat uneasily on my features. After a simple breakfast of coffee and oatmeal, I went to my home office for the morning's most important task. The manila envelope on my desk sat there like something loaded. Villa deed transfer documents, bank statements, all the evidence Lacey would need to understand who had actually been raising her. The property deed had weight to it between my fingers. An $800,000 two-bedroom villa in Boise's most exclusive neighborhood, complete with lakefront access and mountain views. I'd bought it 2 years ago, picturing Lacey and Nolan passing summers there, maybe one day bringing grandchildren to play near the water. The transfer documents were drawn up and waiting, needing only my signature to put Lacey's name on the deed. My original plan had been simple enough. Surprise her after the ceremony, watch her face shift when she realized her supposedly poor father had handed her something Clifford's checkbook couldn't replicate. But that was before Nolan dismissed my limitations. Before Lacey began measuring love against a price tag. I spread the bank statements across the desk. $1.2 million in total assets built through patient investing and the quiet success of Beckett's auto service. The shop Clifford assumed was a struggling garage actually serviced luxury cars for Boise's wealthiest residents. They paid premium rates for discretion and quality, never suspecting their trusted mechanic could buy and sell most of them outright. A photograph of the villa sat alongside the financial papers. Lacey had never laid eyes on it, never knew it existed. The wraparound deck where she might have hosted summer dinners, the private beach where her children might have learned to swim, the master bedroom with its wide lake view, where she could have found stillness in difficult seasons. All of it hinging on one question. Could she love a father who looked like he had nothing? I sealed the documents inside and wrote for Lacey across the front in my careful hand. Tomorrow, depending on what she chose, she would either walk away with the greatest gift of her life or the most expensive lesson in what love actually means. The afternoon passed in deliberate preparation. I ran through my responses to Clifford's anticipated moves, practiced holding my dignity while the pressure came down. I packed an overnight bag. If Lacey chose Clifford's wealth over her father's love, I wouldn't be welcome to stay. My lawyer had confirmed the transfer paperwork was solid. My accountant had walked through the tax side and found it manageable. Everyone was prepared except Lacey, who remained blissfully unaware that her wedding day would also be Judgment Day. At 4 o'clock, Lacey surprised me with a visit. She knocked softly before using her key, calling out, "Dad!" in the voice she'd used as a small child when she wasn't sure if she was in trouble. "In the living room, sweetheart." She appeared in the doorway looking radiant but anxious, her pre-wedding glow dulled by worry lines around her eyes. "You seem distant lately. Is everything okay?" I was tempted to warn her about Clifford's maneuvering, about Nolan's creeping arrogance, about the test that was waiting for her tomorrow. Instead, I got up and held her, pressing the feeling of my daughter in my arms into memory. "I just want you to be happy," I said, and meant it completely. "I can't wait for you to walk me down the aisle tomorrow," she murmured against my shoulder. "It's going to be perfect. Perfect. If only she knew the true price of that perfection, or how much more it might cost tomorrow." After she left, I sat alone as the evening shadows stretched long across the living room floor. The villa deed waited in my jacket pocket, a secret that would either win my daughter back or prove I'd already lost her. My phone buzzed with a text from Linfield Elite Events. Final head count confirmed 150 guests. Looking forward to a beautiful ceremony tomorrow. 150 guests. I knew maybe 30 of them. The rest were Clifford's associates, business partners, restaurant industry contacts who'd never heard of Gerald Beckett and had no reason to care. I was walking into a room full of strangers to either reclaim my daughter or say my goodbye. I set the alarm for 6 a.m. and lay down, fully clothed, eyes fixed on the ceiling. Tomorrow, I'd find out whether 28 years of love could hold its ground against 8 months of luxury. The villa deed shifted in my jacket pocket as I turned over. A sound like money changing hands or like a heart giving way. The Capitol Ballroom parking lot told the story before I'd even set foot inside. My modest Honda sat like the poor relation among the luxury cars. Clifford's black Cadillac, Nolan's BMW, and a long parade of expensive vehicles belonging to guests whose names I'd never know. I pulled into a space near the back and watched through the windshield as Clifford stepped out of his car like a general taking stock of occupied ground. The venue staff treated him like royalty. 3 attendants rushed to hold doors, collect coats, point out the Calloway family's private preparation area. When I reached the entrance with my manila envelope tucked tight in my jacket pocket, those same staff barely glanced up. "Name?" asked a young woman with a clipboard, eyes still down. "Gerald Beckett, father of the bride." Her head came up, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. "Oh, Mr. Beckett, you're at table 12. Table 12. Near the kitchen doors, well away from the elevated head table where Clifford would hold court. I'd been to enough weddings to know a deliberate slight when I saw one. The ballroom had been turned into something out of a luxury magazine. The $15,000 in upgrades Clifford had tacked on were impossible to miss. Cascading orchid arrangements, premium champagne stations, a dessert bar that shimmered with gold leaf. I ran the numbers quickly. He'd put in $65,000 total against what he believed was my $14,000. My table companions were Lacey's college friends, young women who barely placed me and seemed genuinely puzzled about the family dynamics. "So you're Lacey's father?" one asked, adjusting her expensive earrings. "We thought Clifford was covering everything." "Different contributions," I said quietly, watching Clifford receive guests across the room, like a landowner greeting visitors to his estate. From where I stood, I caught pieces of his conversations. "Welcome to my daughter-in-law's wedding. Spare no expense for family, only the finest for our Lacey." Our Lacey, as if she'd been acquired rather than raised. Renee from Linfield Elite Events, who had accepted my $12,000, came over wearing a tight professional smile. "Mr. Beckett, we need to run through the ceremony logistics. You'll walk Lacey halfway down the aisle, then step aside for the Calloway family photographs. Halfway then, step aside." "Of course," I said, pressing my fingers against the envelope in my pocket. I was given 5 minutes with Lacey in the bridal suite, a converted conference room hung in white silk and crowded with flowers. She looked stunning in her $4,000 dress, another gift from Clifford that had appeared without my knowledge. "Dad, you look nice." Her greeting was distracted eyes already moving to the mirror, where her stylist waited with bobby pins. "Is everything in order out there?" I wanted to tell her about the seating arrangements, the steady erasure of my place, the way Clifford had positioned himself as the true host of this day. Instead, I watched her smooth her train. "Lacey, I want you to know, Dad, can we talk after Renee needs to deal with this train?" She was already turning away, pulled back into the wedding details that Clifford's money had layered with unnecessary complications. A photographer materialized yet another Clifford edition, snapping pictures of Lacey with the Calloway family members who'd filled the suite. I noticed that no photographs of Lacey with her father had been planned for the getting ready session. The ceremony was a masterclass in being made invisible. I walked Lacey exactly halfway down the aisle, far enough to satisfy tradition, not far enough to land in the premium photographs Clifford had arranged. Then I stepped aside and watched from the third row as he beamed from the front like a proud patriarch. During the vows, Lacey's eyes found Clifford twice. They never found me. Guests' whispers carried clearly in the acoustically perfect venue. Which one is her real father, again, the one paying or the one walking? Clifford had choreographed every sleight with corporate precision. The ceremony programs listed the Calloway family first. The receiving line placed him and his wife as the primary hosts. Even the wedding favors, crystal picture frames engraved with the date, bore small labels reading with gratitude from the Calloway and Beckett families, with Calloway listed first, despite what alphabetical order would dictate. I sat through all of it, holding on to the dignity that 28 years of fatherhood had built in me. But my hand kept returning to the manila envelope, feeling the clean, sharp edges of documents that could change everything. The reception opened with cocktails I had no part in selecting, served by staff who had been told to defer to Clifford on all decisions. I watched him work the room like a practiced politician, introducing himself to my handful of guests as the father-in-law, while presenting his own associates to Lacey as my dear daughter. Clifford stepped up to the microphone for his welcome remarks before I'd even located my assigned chair. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice rolled across the ballroom, commanding the room with the ease of a man who'd purchased the right to go first. I settled into my seat at table 12, the manila envelope resting against my ribs like something loaded. Clifford's smile was predatory as he surveyed what he'd built. He commanded that microphone like he'd been born holding one. His restaurateur's charm filled the Capitol ballroom with practiced warmth. The guests, his business associates, Lacey's friends, the small handful of people who actually knew me, all turned toward the head table, where he stood beside my glowing daughter. "Ladies and gentlemen, what a perfect day this has been." His voice carried the easy authority of someone who expected to be listened to. Applause moved through the crowd, and I watched Lacey gaze up at him with an admiration that should have been aimed at the man who'd raised her. The premium flowers, the upgraded menu, the champagne service. Clifford swept a hand over the luxuries surrounding us. Each element a monument to what he could spend everything Lacey deserves for her special day. His special day, apparently. My hand found the manila envelope again, feeling the documents inside that could crack his performance open with a single revelation. Now, I know there's been some confusion about who contributed what to this celebration. Clifford continued his smile, sharpening. Nervous laughter moved through guests who sensed the temperature changing, but couldn't yet identify the target. Lacey's expression shifted with uncertainty. This wasn't the warm father figure speech she'd been expecting. Nolan leaned back in his chair, reading his father's setup for exactly what it was: a public execution dressed up as gratitude. "Let me clarify our family's investments," Clifford said, pausing for effect. The word "our" landed like a slap. When had Lacey become part of his family and stopped being part of mine? From table 12, I watched him build toward his punchline with the patience of a man who had never once doubted he would win. I'm proud to say the Calloway family invested $65,000 in this beautiful celebration. He paused for applause from his associates who delivered it enthusiastically. Premium venue, upgraded catering, enhanced floral arrangements, professional photography. No expense spared for our Lacey. Our Lacey. The possessive landed like something thrown hard. But Clifford wasn't done. His eyes found me across the room, and his smile turned sharp. "Of course we appreciate Lacey's father contributing his $14,000. The number hung in the air like a thrown gauntlet. Audible murmurs spread through the guests as they processed the gap. $65,000 versus $14,000. Every family contributes what they can afford. The condescension in his voice could have drawn blood. We're right at the moment where everything I've been quietly carrying is about to come into the open, and what follows will test whether love in this family was ever real or just a number on a check. So, before we get there, tell me this. If someone you'd given everything to chose a stranger's money over your heart, would you walk away in silence, or would you make sure the truth was heard? Several of his business partners actually chuckled as though my supposed financial shortcomings were more comical than admirable. Different leagues, different capabilities. Clifford went on his tone a counterfeit of generosity. I suppose that's the gap between blue-collar dedication and actual business success. Some guests shifted in their seats visibly uneasy. Others, Clifford's crowd, nodded right along. Lacey looked frozen, perhaps only now registering the viciousness behind her benefactor's words, yet unable to absorb what that meant. Clifford wasn't finished dismantling me. He turned slightly, lobbing the words at me across the ballroom with performed warmth. No shame in honest work, right, Jerry? Jerry not. Gerald? The diminutive was deliberate, a quiet signal to the room about where I ranked. Some of us build wealth. Clifford said, his smile spreading as he landed the final blow. Others build character. The beat he left before character was surgically placed. A handful of people actually laughed. Clifford had reduced 28 years of fatherhood to something you consoled yourself with when success was out of reach. The fury rose in my chest like pressure building in a sealed pipe. But my face stayed composed, my posture steady. Let him finish his show. Let Lacey see plainly and completely who she'd chosen to put in my place. Anyway, Clifford wrapped up with theatrical warmth. Here's to family in all its different forms. He raised his champagne glass, and the room followed. Even Lacey lifted hers, though the smile on her face looked like it cost her something. She was starting to see her savior for what he really was, but that clarity arrived too late to spare her father the public humiliation. Clifford set his glass down and fixed his gaze on me, his expression expectant. The room waited. This was my cue to rise, graciously accept the smaller role he'd assigned me, thank him for his largesse, and shuffle aside like the beaten old man he took me for. Instead, I reached inside my jacket and drew out the manila envelope. The gesture was unhurried, but Clifford caught it. That assured smile of his wavered just slightly as he tried to read the unexpected object. I rose slowly, conscious of every eye in the ballroom swinging toward table 12. "Thank you, Clifford," I said, my voice cutting cleanly through the silence. That was illuminating. I moved toward the head table manila envelope in plain view. Clifford stepped back from the microphone with exaggerated courtesy, his smirk broadcasting his expectation, a dignified, deflated little speech about being grateful to be included in his grand occasion. Lacey watched me approach, with curiosity, not concern. After all, what could her financially outmatched father possibly offer to rival Clifford's sweeping generosity? I reached the microphone and looked out at 150 faces, most of them strangers, who had spent the evening being told I was a footnote in my own daughter's life. My grip tightened on the manila envelope as Clifford's words played back in my head. Different leagues, blue-collar dedication. Some of us build wealth, others build character. It was time to show them all the difference between building wealth and buying love. The ballroom went quiet as I stood at the microphone manila envelope clearly in hand. 150 faces looked up at me, waiting to see how I'd answer Clifford's $65,000 versus $14,000 speech. I could feel the weight of 28 years of fatherhood pressing into this single moment. "Thank you, Clifford," I said, my voice steady through the sound system. That was illuminating. A few nervous laughs moved through the crowd. They caught the edge in my tone, but couldn't yet tell where it was aimed. Clifford stood alongside me, his smile unshaken, bracing for my polite surrender. But I wasn't ready to speak my piece yet. There was one more thing to do first. Before I respond to Clifford's financial comparisons, I said I'd like Lacey to say a few words. Lacey's eyes went wide. She hadn't been expecting to speak. This wasn't on the program. "Dad, what do you mean?" I eased a half step aside, extending the microphone toward her, while keeping the manila envelope visible in my other hand. "Just a few words about who has truly been there for you." Clifford gave an approving nod. In his mind, this was ideal, a chance for Lacey to publicly credit the Calloway family's overwhelming generosity. He probably expected her to talk about the $65,000, the premium flowers, the upgraded catering. My heart hammered as Lacey stepped toward the microphone. This was it. My daughter's last real chance to choose love over luxury. To reach back for the man who'd raised her before Clifford's money finished reshaping her sense of who mattered. Please, I thought, please choose me. Lacey took the microphone, her hands trembling slightly. She looked stunning under the ballroom lights, her $4,000 dress catching the glow as she turned to the crowd. I want to thank everyone who made this day possible. She started, her voice warm and clear. A flicker of hope lit up my chest. Maybe Clifford's cruelty had cracked something open in her. Maybe she'd finally see past the money to what was underneath. But I especially want to thank my real father. The words landed like a fist. My real father. Those exact words, the ones that had stalked my worst nights for months. Lacey's hand rose, and it pointed not toward me, but toward Clifford Calloway. Clifford Calloway has shown me what a father's love truly looks like. Whispers and gasps broke across the ballroom. Some guests looked baffled, others mortified. A few of Clifford's business associates actually smiled, as if Lacey's betrayal were entertaining rather than devastating. I stood motionless, the manila envelope shaking in my grip, watching my daughter publicly disown me in favor of the man who'd purchased her loyalty with restaurant money. He's taught me that real love means providing the very best for your family. Lacey went on, her voice growing stronger as she found her footing. He's shown a generosity and commitment that goes beyond just trying hard. Trying hard. She had reduced 28 years of single parenthood midnight fevers, school plays, college tuition, and sacrifices she never knew about to trying hard. Clifford has given me the wedding of my dreams. And more than that, he's given me a family that knows how to properly take care of each other. Properly. As if everything I had ever done was insufficient, amateurish, not quite good enough. The crowd sat in stunned quiet. Even Clifford's supporters seemed unsettled by the blunt force of Lacey's rejection. My childhood friends, the small group who had known Lacey since she was born, looked mortified for me. Nolan beamed with pride at his wife's loyalty to his family. Clifford's triumphant smile could have lit up the room on its own, and Lacey pressed on blind to the damage her words were doing. So thank you, Clifford, for being the father I needed when I needed one most. She set the microphone back in its stand and stepped in to hug Clifford, leaving me standing beside them, like something that had been set down and forgotten. The ballroom held an eerie silence. Nobody quite knew what to do with what had just happened. Something cracked inside my chest, not just my heart, but something deeper. The part of me that had believed unconditional love could outlast unlimited money. The part that had held out hope that my daughter would choose the man who raised her over the man who bankrolled her. Lacey had made her choice. She'd named Clifford her real father in front of 150 witnesses. She'd picked his money over my love, his recent generosity over a lifetime of mine. The test was over. She had failed completely and catastrophically. I stepped back to the microphone, the manila envelope heavier than ever in my hand. Clifford moved aside with that same theatrical courtesy, satisfaction radiating off him. He thought the night was done, that Lacey's speech had been the last word in my humiliation. He was wrong. Thank you, Lacey, I said, my voice quiet and level. That was revealing. I opened the manila envelope and drew out the first document, the villa deed, its printed heading plainly visible to guests at the nearest tables. Lacey stared at the paperwork in my hands, confused. Clifford's smile held, though I noticed a spark of curiosity flicker behind his eyes. Now, I said, lifting the deed so Lacey could read it clearly. Let me tell you about real fathers. The ballroom held its breath. I raised the villa deed high enough for her to make out the header. Property deed, Boise Foothills Villa. Market value, $800,000. Her face went blank. Dad, what is that? This morning, Lacey, I planned to give you this as a wedding gift. My voice carried across the silent room. An $800,000 property I purchased for you and Nolan 2 years ago. The number hit the crowd like a crack of thunder. Audible gasps rolled in from every corner. For the first time, Clifford's confident smile faltered, uncertainty moving into his expression. But that was when I believed my daughter understood the difference between love and money. I reached into the envelope again and pulled out bank statements and receipts. Clifford mentioned I contributed $14,000 to this wedding. Let me offer some clarity. Lacey's eyes widened as she recognized official documents bearing large, unmistakable figures. Linfield Elite Events Coordination fee $12,000. I paid that. I looked directly at Lacey. Ray Linfield was never my friend's sweetheart. Ray Linfield doesn't exist. I created that story to rescue your wedding while keeping up the appearance that your father was a man of limited means. Lacey's hand flew to her mouth. As Dad, your dress alterations $2,400, upgraded catering additions $3,500, premium centerpieces $1,800, upgraded linens $950. I held her horrified gaze. My actual contribution to this wedding, $39,000. The ballroom hummed with whispers as guests absorbed what I had just revealed. Clifford's face had gone pale, the weight of my words slowly settling in. But, Lacey, that's not really the point. I drew out the final document, a bank statement laying my complete financial picture bare. I'm not the struggling mechanic you've been embarrassed by. I held the statement where she could read the balance. $1,470,000. I own 3 properties, including the villa that was meant to be your wedding gift. Beckett's Auto Service is worth $1.2 to $2 million. I could have outspent Clifford without breaking a sweat. Could have given you a wedding that would have made this one look modest by comparison. Lacey's world was visibly collapsing around her. Tears began sliding down her face as the full weight of what she'd done came into focus. You mean, you could have, Clifford started, paid for everything? Yes, given Lacey the most lavish wedding in Boise history without question. I looked at each of them in turn, but I needed to test something that mattered far more than my bank balance. I brought my attention back to Lacey, whose tears were now dropping freely onto her expensive dress. I kept my wealth hidden, Lacey, because I had to know whether you could love a father who had nothing. I needed to find out if 28 years of raising you meant more than 8 months of Clifford's money. Dad, you don't understand, she started. You just called Clifford your real father. I cut in front of 150 people. You chose him because he spent more, didn't you? Silence stretched across every corner of the ballroom. Lacey's mouth opened, but nothing came out. When Clifford spent this evening tearing me down, comparing his $65,000 to what he believed was my $14,000, where were you? When he labeled me blue-collar and implied I could only build character because I couldn't build wealth, did you stand up for the man who raised you? Lacey's silence said everything. I raised the villa deed once more, its value now unmistakable to everyone in the room. This property was going to be my gift to you, Lacey. $800,000 more than Clifford spent on this entire event. She reached toward the document, desperate. Dad, please. But real fathers don't purchase their children's love. I looked at the deed, then back at her. And since you have a real father now, you don't need gifts from your biological one. I began tearing the deed in half. No, Dad, don't, Lacey screamed, lunging forward. I stopped midway, the document damaged but not destroyed. The ballroom was completely silent, except for Lacey's sobs. This villa would have been yours, Lacey. Lakefront property, a private beach mountain, views a place for you and Nolan to build your lives. I set the partially torn deed on the table in front of her. But you chose Clifford as your real father. I turned to Clifford, whose face had lost every trace of color. Your daughter needs you now, Clifford. She'll be expecting her inheritance. Clifford stammered. Now wait, I never said, didn't you? I asked quietly. You accepted the title of real father. That title carries responsibilities. I placed the damaged deed directly in front of Lacey. Her tears fell onto the legal document, darkening the paper where they landed. Ask your real father for your wedding gift, Lacey. I stepped back from the microphone and started toward the ballroom exit. Behind me, Lacey's voice broke with desperation. Dad, please wait, I didn't mean... But I kept walking my footsteps, carrying across the stunned silence of the room. My steps rang out across the marble floor of the ballroom entrance, each one pulling me further from the wreckage of what I'd built with Lacey. Behind me, I heard the rustle of expensive fabric and the click of heels as she ran after me, her wedding dress catching on chairs and dragging across the polished floor. Dad, please don't leave. Her voice cracked with desperation, but I didn't turn. 28 years of fatherhood had just been publicly discarded in exchange for 8 months of Clifford Calloway's money. There was nothing left to say. Dad, stop. We need to talk. She caught me in the venue lobby. The hard brightness of the crystal chandeliers felt jarring after the warm light of the ballroom. When Lacey's hand closed around my arm, I finally turned to face her. She looked devastated, mascara tracked down both cheeks, her carefully pinned hair coming loose. The $4,000 dress Clifford had provided was wrinkled and scuffed from her frantic chase. "We just did talk, Lacey," I said quietly, in front of 150 people. I didn't mean that Clifford was my real father. The words tumbled out in a rush. I was grateful for all the wedding help, and so grateful you forgot who raised you for 28 years. Lacey's mouth opened and closed without a sound. Behind her, Nolan appeared slightly winded, looking uneasy in his expensive tuxedo. "Mr. Beckett," Nolan said, reaching for diplomacy. "Maybe we can work through this. Lacey's emotional. It's been a long day." I gave him the same level look I'd honed over years of dealing with difficult customers. "Ask your father to adopt her officially, Nolan, since she prefers his parenting style." "Dad, please!" Lacey's voice climbed with panic. I got swept up in the moment. The wedding was overwhelming. I never meant to hurt you. "You never defended me tonight," I replied, my voice steady despite the ache behind it. "For hours you watched Clifford humiliate me. You let him call me blue-collar and joke about what I couldn't do. Where was your gratitude then?" Lacey's face crumpled. "But you're not poor. You have over $1 million. Why didn't you tell me?" And there it was. The question that told me everything I needed to know about where things stood. "Would that have changed how you treated me?" I asked. She started to answer, then stopped. We both understood the truth. If she'd known about my wealth, she would have acted like a devoted daughter, not out of love, but because I could match what Clifford was offering. "Sir," Nolan cut in, and I could see the arithmetic working behind his eyes. He was thinking about the $800,000 villa, weighing what Lacey's rejection had cost them. "Lacey loves you. This is just a family misunderstanding." "Worried about the villa, Nolan?" I asked. He had the decency to look embarrassed. "No, sir. It's about family. Your family has Clifford," I said. "Mine no longer includes Lacey." "Dad, please don't say that." Lacey sobbed, reaching for me again. I gently lifted her hand from my arm. "You said it first when you named Clifford your real father." "I'll make it right," she pleaded. "I'll tell everyone I made a mistake." "How by loving me for my money now instead of his?" I shook my head. "That's not love, Lacey. That's arithmetic." "I have always loved you," she cried. "Then why did you need Clifford to validate me? Why weren't 28 years of devotion enough?" I looked at her tear-streaked face. This daughter I had sacrificed everything to raise. "You couldn't love a poor father, Lacey, so you don't deserve a rich one." Nolan stepped forward one final time. "What about the villa deed, the one you tore?" I nearly smiled at how transparent he was. "Ask Clifford to buy you a villa. He's your real father now that comes with financial responsibilities." I turned and walked toward the parking lot exit. Behind me, Lacey's sobs echoed off the lobby walls. "Dad, I need you." I paused at the glass doors, but didn't turn around. "You needed Clifford more." The cool night air met my face as I stepped outside. My modest Honda sat alone in the corner of the lot, surrounded by the luxury vehicles belonging to Clifford's associates. As I crossed the pavement toward it, Lacey's voice reached me one last time, raw with desperation. "Please don't abandon me." I reached the car and rested my hand on the door handle. In the window's reflection, I could see Lacey collapsed in the doorway, her wedding dress fanned out around her like a broken white bloom. Nolan was trying to get her to her feet, his expression showing more concern for their lost inheritance than for his wife's grief. I got in, closed the door, and turned the engine over. In the rearview mirror, Lacey was on her knees in the parking lot, still calling my name. My hand rested on the gear shift. 28 years of love went to war with the fresh memory of her betrayal. She looked so shattered, so utterly lost. But then her words came back to me. "Clifford Calloway has shown me what a father's love truly looks like." I put the car in drive. 1 month later, I sat across from my attorney at his polished mahogany desk, going through the final paperwork that would close the most painful chapter of my life. The donation had been processed that morning. $800,000 transferred to Boise Children's Hospital, ensuring that what Lacey's betrayal had cost me would at least do some good in the world. "The hospital is overjoyed, Gerald," my lawyer said, sliding the receipt across to me. "This gift will help fund their new pediatric wing. You should feel proud. Proud wasn't quite the word I'd reach for. Satisfied, maybe. After a month of turning it all over, I'd come to understand that Lacey's test had confirmed exactly what I'd been afraid of. She could only love what money could provide. The villa would have been wasted on her. Mr. Beckett? The receptionist's voice came through the intercom with a crackle. There's a Lacey Calloway here to see you. She says it's urgent. I shut my eyes and let out a slow breath. A month of unanswered calls, unopened letters, and a disconnected number hadn't been enough to convince her to let it go. Somehow, she'd found me. Send her in, I told the receptionist. It was time to put this to rest properly. Lacey walked into my attorney's office looking like a faded shadow of the glowing bride she'd been 4 weeks earlier. She'd dropped weight, her clothes hung off her frame, and the strain had carved new lines around her eyes. Life with Nolan was clearly not the fairy tale Clifford's money had advertised. Dad. Her voice was small and unsure. How did you find me, Lacey? She settled into the chair across from me without waiting to be invited. I hired a private investigator. I've been trying to reach you for a month. I needed time to think about us, about forgiveness. Hope stirred behind her eyes. About what to do with the villa. Her face went pale. You still have it. I glanced at my attorney, who gave a small nod. I sold it yesterday. Lacey's world visibly fell apart for the second time in a month. Sold it to who? My attorney slid the hospital receipt across to her. Boise Children's Hospital, $800,000. Your father has made the single largest donation in their history. Lacey stared at the document, her hands unsteady. You gave away my inheritance. I gave my money to people who have earned it, I said, correcting her. You called Clifford your real father, Lacey, so I'm treating you like Clifford's daughter, not mine. But I am your real daughter, she cried. Real daughters don't trade their fathers in for money, I answered, keeping my voice level. That hospital will save children's lives with what I gave them, something worth a great deal more than your wedding day humiliation. The office door swung open, and Nolan came in looking frantic and put out. Lacey had clearly called him in desperation. Did you get the villa back? That was his opening line. I watched the exchange with a kind of detached calm. Even now, standing in the middle of the complete collapse of his wife's relationship with her father, Nolan's first concern was the lost property. Your wife chose well, Nolan, I said. You both care about exactly the same things. That's not fair, he shot back. Neither was calling Clifford her real father. Lacey looked between us, and I could see it dawning on her the full measure of what she'd thrown away. I've lost everything, haven't I? You chose everything you thought mattered, I replied. My attorney handed me the final receipt. Mr. Beckett, the Children's Hospital, has confirmed the donation has been received and processed. A deep sense of satisfaction settled over me as I looked at the paperwork. $800,000 going towards sick children. Far better spent than funding another ungrateful wedding. Lacey's face collapsed with understanding. You planned this all along. I planned to test your heart, Lacey. You failed, but those children will benefit from it. I rose and gathered my papers. Their parents will discover what real love looks like when the hospital saves their sons and daughters. Is there any way back? She whispered. I looked at her one last time. This daughter who had chosen Clifford Calloway's money over her father's love, who had stood at a microphone and publicly dismantled the man who raised her, who had reduced 28 years of devotion to an embarrassing inconvenience. Ask Clifford, I said. He's your real father now. I moved toward the door, briefcase in hand. Lacey didn't come after me this time. She was too hollowed out, too defeated. Dad, she called softly. I stopped in the doorway but didn't look back. I hope Clifford's money keeps you warm, Lacey. You're going to need it. As I made my way through the law office lobby, I could hear Nolan's voice behind me. How could you give away $800,000? Do you have any idea what you've cost us? I stepped out into the afternoon sun, feeling lighter than I had in months. My phone buzzed with another call from Lacey's number. I looked at the screen, switched the phone off, and got into my car. The radio played softly as I drove through downtown Boise, past the auto shop I'd eventually sell, past the restaurants that had made Clifford Calloway rich, heading home to my modest house, where I could finally have some peace. Justice had been done. The Children's Hospital would raise their new wing on what had been Lacey's lost inheritance, and I was finally free from a daughter who had loved Clifford Calloway's money more than her father's heart. If you've stayed with me all the way to the end of this story, then you already know this wasn't really about money. It never was. What this cost me is something I'll carry for the rest of my life. 28 years of early mornings, quiet sacrifices, and a love I never thought I'd have to prove. And yet, when the moment came, it wasn't enough. I believe God allows certain heartbreaks not to destroy us, but to show us exactly where we were placing our worth. That clarity, as painful as it was, turned out to be a gift. The $800,000 I once set aside for Lacey now helps build a pediatric wing at Boise Children's Hospital. Children who have no say in their circumstances will have a fighting chance because of what was lost. That's not nothing. That's everything. If this family revenge story has stirred something in you, then let it also teach you something. First, never measure your love by what you spend. Real devotion shows up at midnight in the ordinary, in the years not in a single grand gesture. Second, if you have to hide who you are to be accepted, you are not being loved, you are being used. Third, when someone tells you who they are, in a moment of pressure, believe them the first time. Don't negotiate with a clear answer. Fourth, the best revenge is not anger. It is redirecting what you had to offer toward people who truly need it. This is what Dad's revenge looks like when it's done right. Not cruelty, not bitterness, just truth quietly spoken with your dignity intact. If this story reached something in, you share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Leave your thoughts in the comments. I read them, and they matter to me. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to Dad's Revenge so you never miss a story like this one. Thank you for listening. Take good care of yourself. Until next time.